Do you really think that the creator of this magnificent edifice of the universe, the expanding universe, the galaxies, he really couldn't think of a better way to get rid of the sins on this one little speck of dust than to have himself tortured? He's the one who's doing the forgiving after all. Couldn't he just have forgiven?
Because this is a moral universe, Richard, and just forgiving doesn't make sense.
You mean he has to kill himself in order to...
He doesn't kill himself.
Or get himself killed,
God,
tortured.
God sends his Son into the world to provide forgiveness and to provide a basis on which he can justly bring forgiveness to me. Now,
he has to get himself killed in order to do that.
Well, half a minute. We need to step back from this a little bit because it's actually a highly relevant topic. In your world, where is justice?
Justice is a human construct of great importance in human affairs, and it's something that we have, most of us have a sense of, which I think probably can be given some sort of Darwinian explanation, but I don't see where you're taking this.
Well, my question is there any ultimate justice? You see, you say this is petty. I'm saying I find myself in a world which is a broken world. I find myself in a world where there's massive injustice. If there is no God, then there's no ultimate justice. And one of the things that the resurrection transforms for me from pettiness right into center stage is, if this is true, then there's real hope that there be a rational evaluation and fair justice at the end of the world. But atheism doesn't give you that.
Okay, suppose there is no hope, suppose there is no justice, suppose there's nothing but misery and darkness and bleakness, suppose there is nothing that we would wish for, nothing that we would hope for. Too bad. That doesn't make it true just because God would make us feel good.
Well, of course it doesn't.
Well, then why do you bring that argument up?
Because I believe that there is evidence that it is true. I don't believe in the resurrection just like that, because faith is based on evidence.
What you said before was that there is no hope without God. And it sounded
well, that's true. That's absolutely true.
Okay.
And you just admitted it. So
I haven't admitted it. I said, if that's true,
yes.
So what? I didn't say it was true. But anyway,
but therefore
if that's
the question
true, so
to be decided then is there a God, and has he revealed himself? And that's where, again, I think this pettiness needs to be pushed aside, because I can't get to know you as a person. You're not just a scientific object. I could look at you through a telescope or a magnifying glass. I could even dissect you and so on and so forth. But because you are a person, I cannot get to know you unless you're prepared to reveal yourself to me. So the fact that the claim of Christ to be the truth, to be God incarnate, that makes perfect sense to me, because if there is a God who invented this wonderful, marvelous universe with all its science and all the rest, then he has taken the initiative in getting to know us and revealing himself to us. And he's revealed himself to us at the level we can understand. We're persons, he's a person. That at least makes sense. So one of the very important questions to ask is that really true? Or is this simply myth and fantasy?
Well, myth and fantasy for me.
Yeah, well, do you know, that disturbs me for the following reason. Reading your book, The God Delusion, you say that it's under scholarly dispute among historians that Jesus actually existed. Now, I checked with the ancient historians. That is not so. And it disturbed me. History is not natural science. But what I don't understand is this: why you would write something like that.
I don't think it's a very important question.
Sure, Jan.
Whether Jesus existed. There are some historians, most historians think he did, some
They
historians
certainly
don't.
do. I couldn't find an ancient historian that didn't.
Well, there are one or two, but I don't really care, actually, because precisely because it's petty. I mean, if you could possibly persuade me that there was some kind of creative force in the universe, there was some kind of physical, mathematical genius who created everything. The expanding universe, devised quantum theory, relativity, and all that. You could possibly persuade me of that. But that is radically and fundamentally incompatible with the sort of God who cares about sin, the sort of God who is interested, who has the slightest interest in your private thoughts and wickednesses and things like that. Surely you can see that a God who's grand enough to make the universe is not going to give a tuppenny cuss about what you're thinking about and your sins and things like that.
So you think that morality is not important?
Of course I don't think morality is not important. I'm
well,
a human being.
It sounds like you're saying it isn't important.
I'm a human being, and I live in a society of human beings, and within a society of human beings, morality is of course important. But we are one of billions of planets on a huge scale, and a cosmic God who bothers about this kind of human scale is not the kind of God that is compatible with a scientific view of the universe. It's a medieval view.
But do you think that size is the measure of importance? Incidentally, on a logarithmic scale, you're about halfway between the atom and the universe. So if God thinks in terms of logarithms, your point falls, I think.
I mean, this is in a sense an emotional argument we've come into now. And
I don't think so at all.
I want to if I were going to respect a God, it would be the kind of God the sort of God that Carl Sagan might have worshipped, not the sort of medieval God who fusses about sin, the obsession with sin and righteousness and sort of, I keep coming back to this word petty, and I stand by it. We need the evidence.
We need the evidence. And what I'm suggesting to you is that we do have evidence. We have it in science, part of God's revelation. I get the impression that you're not taking history really seriously. Otherwise, you'd interact with it. And I'm trying to get to the basis of why that is so, because you regard what Jesus has done and who he is as petty. And I find the contrast between standing tall in a silent and cold universe with no hope, believing that your moral sense must ultimately be illusion. You're crying for justice because most people will never get it, because death ends everything. The contrast between that and enjoying the friendship, the personal friendship of God, and knowing that ultimate justice will be done, is immense.
Well,
but the basic question is it true or not?
Yeah, that is the basic question. It is completely irrelevant if it's comforting, if it gives you hope, if it gives you happiness. That has nothing to do with whether it's true.
That I agree with entirely.
So we need to know whether it's true.
Yes.
Now, when you look at history, and let's leave aside, maybe I alluded to the possibility that some historians think Jesus never existed. I take that back. Jesus existed. However, if you're going to say that Jesus was born of a virgin, that Jesus walked on water, that he turned water into wine, that is palpably anti-scientific. There is no evidence for that. And if there were, you would be, well, I mean, no, there simply isn't any evidence for that, and no scientist could possibly take the idea seriously.
I can make it worse for you.
I know you can.
Because Jesus actually claimed to be the Logos that created the whole universe. And if this is the Creator incarnate, making water into wine and so on is really a triviality. The more fundamental thing is the fact that he claimed to be and gave evidence that he was God. When you say it's anti-scientific, I don't think it's anti-scientific at all. Science cannot say that miracles do not occur. It can say they're highly improbable. But nobody is claiming that these things occurred by natural processes. They occurred because God fed his power in. Nor did the whole universe, if we look at it, occur in that sense by natural processes. God created it. We study all the natural processes within it. So when you say it's anti-scientific, I think it's not anti-scientific.
What I mean by that is that if, and when doing science, we constantly have to keep in mind that at any moment there might be a little magic trick slipped in. That would completely nullify the whole enterprise of science.
Oh, I agree with that. But
well,
you see,
that's what you're allowing then.
No, I'm not allowing that at all, because in order to recognize what the New Testament calls miracle, a special act of God, you must be living in a universe that has regularities and that we recognize them. I agree with you entirely.
Otherwise you wouldn't notice the miracles.
That's exactly true. You wouldn't recognize if dead people were popping up all over the place. You wouldn't think it was very special. But the fact is you need two things, not one. You've got to have regularities which we call the laws of nature, although they're not causes. They're, in a sense, descriptions that we can use. You also need to be able to recognize those so that, for example, when Joseph discovered that his wife-to-be Mary was pregnant, he simply didn't believe her story. He was going to divorce her. He knew exactly where babies came from. He knew the regularity. It took very special convincing for him to realize that something extremely special had happened. But science cannot stop that. The question is, of course, did such a thing ever happen? And the central focus in the New Testament is not that, which is not so readily accessible to evidence, the virgin conception, but the resurrection of Christ. And ancient historians, and this has fascinated me recently going over it, ancient historians whose discipline is very venerable, and I'm not talking about Christian ancient historians, ancient historians, many of them, even at the skeptical end of the spectrum, say that the evidence for the resurrection of Christ is very powerful. The explosion of the Christian church from a non-proselytizing group of Jews in the first century, the empty tomb and all the rest of it, has even led Geza Vermesh, who's one of the most distinguished ancient historians in Oxford, to say, yes, this tomb was empty, and hallucinations and this kind of explanation do not wash. So we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to believe in historical testimony or not?
Well, you must talk to different historians than the one I talk to, but in any case, I still come back to the point that you cannot do science if at any time you remember that famous cartoon of the...
Oh, I do. And therefore a miracle happens in the middle of the equation, yes.
I mean, that is deeply against the spirit of science, and I don't think I could do science if I thought that at any time something like the resurrection, something like the virgin birth was going to be smuggled in by a godly caprice.
So what is the ultimate meaning of life for you?
The ultimate meaning of life depends on what you mean by it, obviously. Each one of us can make an ultimate meaning. Each one of us can have a private meaning, a purpose in our life, what we hope to achieve in our life. Or a biologist might say the ultimate meaning of life is the propagation of genes. That would be a very different kind of meaning. They're both true.
I suppose the basic question for me here is, what is the nature of ultimate reality? If ultimate reality is simply the universe, in some sense, or multiverse, that's one thing. And I am at a loss to understand how you get from simple atoms, elementary particles, and so on, to a brain, let alone a mind, the I, the person. And we don't understand what consciousness is, and so on. I don't begin to see, and I don't think scientists begin to see, how you can get to something that even understands the concept of meaning. But I can understand it if behind the universe, the ultimate reality is not impersonal matter and energy that somehow has produced all this stuff bottom up. I can understand it if it's top down, as well as partly bottom up, and that is that there is a God who is personal, who is good, who is the source of life and meaning, and who reaches out to me as a person, and who, in fact, far from stopping me doing science, encourages the development of the mind that he has given me. And so meaning to me has all kinds of dimensions, as you would agree with, in my family, with my wife and my children and my work and so on. But it's not bounded by the 70 years and 10. It's not bounded by the death of the universe either. It's got an expanding horizon of hope. And that, to me, is the only thing that is worthy of the God that created this vast cosmos. That our lives are not going to be extinguished just like that. There is a beyond, and I can walk with confidence into that beyond because I have a real relationship that's got a firm basis with the God who invented it all.
When you say faith is rational and evidence-based, I mean, if that were true, it wouldn't need to be faith, would it? I mean, if there were evidence for it, why would you need to call it faith? You'd say just evidence. And when you said that faith in relativity, in Einstein's theory of relativity, is evidence-based, that of course it is. But the evidence is all important. I mean, Einstein's predictions fit in with observed fact and with a whole body of theory, whereas we only need to use the word faith when there isn't any evidence.
No, not at all. I presume you've got faith in your wife. Is there any evidence for that?
Yes,
on which
plenty.
You base it? Yes.
Plenty of evidence. Let's generalize it. Never mind about my wife. Let's generalize.